My girlfriend and her content studio friend used me for content. So I quietly moved out after she said you're a joke. I snapped photos of the girls' trip legends chat, pulled the lock history and hallway clip, left her an empty duplex and my note, and she landed on unpaid leave. The first thing that made my stomach drop was not a text. It was an email preview on the shared tablet we kept on the kitchen counter. The subject line glowed like it wanted to be seen, even in the dim morning light. I did not touch it yet, but I already felt like something in my home had shifted. That day I was 39 and I made a living checking fire sprinkler systems in old buildings around Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I carried a scuffed tool case and a pressure gauge that smelled like metal and rubber. I listened for leaks and watched for weak spots, because small failures become big floods later. I learned to trust what I could measure, not what someone promised. At home, our place was a narrow duplex near the marsh, with salty air that crept in under the door. The entryway always smelled like citrus hand soap and wet wool coats. A bowl of keys sat on the shoe bench, and our little robot vacuum hummed every evening at 7 like a tired pet. Those routines used to calm me until they started to feel like a loop I could not escape. My girlfriend Delphine Cross worked in patient relations at Seacoast Regional, where a calm voice and clean judgment mattered. She took complaints from families, walked them through paperwork, and spoke for people who felt powerless. She had a code of conduct drilled into her, and she wore it like a polished pin on her badge. At least, that is what I believed. Delphine was leaving for a girls' trip in 2 days, 3 nights down in St. Simon's Island, Georgia. She said she needed sun and laughter and a break from winter and hospital stress. She said her friends were planning a reset weekend for her. I smiled and nodded because I wanted her to feel cared for. But her friends had a way of treating me like a prop in their jokes. They called me Mr. Safety in a tone that made it sound like an insult. They laughed when I talked about work, like checking valves was something a child could do. I did not need applause, but I did need basic respect. The first confrontation happened on a Tuesday night while she packed sandals onto our bed. I said, "Do you notice how your friends talk about me?" Delphine did not look up, just folded a shirt and said, "They are teasing. You take everything too seriously." I tried to swallow it, but it sat in my throat like dry bread. I want to give one piece of advice right here, because I learned it the hard way. If your partner laughs with the crowd when the joke is you, do not pretend it is fine. Ask once, clearly in private, and listen to the answer. The answer tells you what your future will feel like. 2 nights later, Delphine came home late from dinner with her friends. She smelled like peppermint gum and cold air, and her cheeks were red from laughing. She tossed her bag on the chair, looked at me like she was still on stage, and said it. "My friends think you're a joke. And honestly, they're not wrong," she said. The words were simple, but they landed heavy. She did not shout. She said it like a truth she had finally stopped hiding. I stared at the sink, at 2 plates drying on the rack, at a crumb on the counter I had missed. My mind did that strange thing where it tries to make a new shape out of something that does not fit. I said, "What did you just say to me?" She shrugged like it was no big deal, and that shrug hurt almost more than the words. She added, "They just see what I see. You play it safe. You never level up." Then she smiled like she had delivered a clever line. That smile was the moment I realized I was not in a partnership. I was in someone else's story. That night I did not yell. I did not slam doors. I lay awake listening to the radiator tick and the robot vacuum bump its dock. I kept thinking, when did I become the punchline in my own home? The next morning, I went to work at an old brick mill that had been turned into offices. The stairwell smelled like damp stone and coffee, and the pipes above me rattled when the heat kicked on. I did a flow test on the main line and watched the needle rise steady. I remember thinking, water does not lie. Back home at lunch, Delphine was on a video call with her friend Sabine Pell. Sabine ran a small content studio that filmed funny relationship bits for local brands. She had ring lights in her living room and a voice that always sounded like she was already laughing. When I walked in, Delphine clicked the screen dark a little too fast. That was the mini hook I could not ignore. When someone hides a normal thing, it is rarely normal. I told myself to stay calm, but my hands felt cold. Later that day, I finally tapped the shared tablet. The email preview from earlier was still there. It was from Sabine, and the subject line read, "Weekend beats and the punchline plan." I did not open it yet. I just stared at those words until my eyes burned. A plan, a punchline, and Delphine leaving town in 2 days. That evening Delphine was sweet again, almost too sweet. She made pasta, put on music, and kissed my cheek like she could erase last night with garlic and good timing. She said, "I was harsh. I am just stressed." Her tone was warm, but it felt practiced. I did not confront her then. I watched her like I was watching a gauge. I waited to see if the needle settled, or if pressure kept building. The communication proof came first, and it came by accident, which is how most truth shows up. Delphine left her laptop open on the couch while she showered. A message bubble popped up in the corner with the words, "He will do the face. Please." The chat title was Girls Trip Legends. I should have closed it. I should have walked away. Instead, I clicked, because my name was already being used as entertainment. The thread was full of jokes about me, screenshots of my work boots, a photo of me holding my pressure gauge like it was a toy, taken without me knowing. Sabine wrote, "We need him to say the safety thing, that will kill." Delphine replied with a laughing emoji and wrote, "I already told him my friends think he is a joke. He went quiet. Perfect setup." My chest went tight like the room had lost air. In that moment, I was not her partner. I was her content. Here is my second piece of advice, because this matters. When you find disrespect written down, do not argue with the tone first. Save the facts. Take a photo of what you see, then step away and breathe. Your brain works better when your body is not in panic. I took 3 photos of the thread with my own phone, clear and full screen. I did not hack anything. I did not dig through private accounts. She left it open in our shared living room on a device she used every day like it was harmless. When Delphine came out of the bathroom, her hair wet and her face fresh, she saw my expression. She said, "What is wrong?" Her voice was soft, like she wanted to pull me back into comfort. I said, "You and your friends are planning jokes about me. You wrote that I went quiet and it was perfect." Delphine blinked, then smiled, then her eyes narrowed. "You read my messages," she said, like that was the main crime. "That was confrontation too, and this time I pushed." I said, "You left it open." "You called me a joke to your friends." Delphine's voice turned sharp and she said, "You are controlling. You want me isolated. You cannot handle me having fun." Her words flipped the blame so fast it made me dizzy. She grabbed her laptop and held it to her chest like I was a thief. "It is not that serious," she said. "It is banter." Then she walked into the bedroom and shut the door, sweet gone, sharp in its place. I stood in the hallway staring at the closed door. I kept hearing her phrase in my head like it had carved a groove. "My friends think you're a joke," and honestly, they're not wrong. That night I did not sleep much. I kept thinking about time, because time was suddenly a weapon. Our landlord had emailed me about the lease renewal, and he needed an answer by Friday to hold the unit. Friday was the middle of Delphine's trip. I opened our shared bank app the next morning, the one we used for rent and utilities. I did not have to snoop. A bank alert banner was right there. It said a transfer had been sent to Pell Studio LLC for $480. The note on the transfer read, "Deposit for weekend shoot." That was the money proof, and it made everything feel colder. They were not just joking. They were investing in it. I scrolled back and saw 2 more smaller transfers from earlier in the month, both to the same place. One was labeled Script Pass. Another said Edit Rush. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. I went to work and tried to focus, but my mind kept snapping back to Delphine's laughing emoji. I did another flow test in a dusty stairwell and watched the needle move clean and true. I thought, if my systems are honest, why is my home not? By Thursday morning, Delphine acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me goodbye, told me to feed the sourdough starter, and reminded me that the trash pickup was at 6. Her normal voice felt like a mask. She left for the airport with a carry-on bag and a bright smile. As soon as her car pulled away, the house felt too quiet. The radiator ticked. The marsh wind rattled the back door. And I realized I had a choice, right then, with no audience and no noise. I called my attorney that night from a 24-hour laundromat off the highway because it was the only place open and bright. The dryers rumbled like distant thunder, and the air smelled like soap and warm lint. The lawyer's name was Gideon Marlowe, and he sounded older, calm, like nothing surprised him anymore. I told him I was not married, but we lived together and shared bills. I told him about the humiliation and the group chat and the transfers. He said, "Do not destroy anything. Do not take what is not yours. Leave a clear written note and keep your proof." Then he added, "And protect your peace because no one else will." That was my third piece of advice. When you feel your world tipping, do not run on rage. Get one steady person to tell you what is smart. A short call can save you months of chaos. Friday morning, I went to the landlord's office and signed the non-renewal notice. The lease was in my name, and Delphine had moved in later without adding her name. I had always meant to fix that, but now that detail mattered. The landlord looked at me and asked, "Everything okay?" I said, "No, but I will be." I rented a small storage unit near the shipyard, not far from my job sites. It smelled like plywood and coal dust. I moved my things in careful trips, like I was packing up a life one box at a time. I did not take her things. I did not take shared items we both used. I took my tools, my clothes, my books, and the framed photo of my late father that I kept on my desk. I left the couch, the dishes, the towels, because I did not want a war over fabric. I also did something simple but necessary. I changed the password on my personal email, my work accounts, and my streaming profile. I removed my card from the auto pay that covered her salon subscription and her boutique gym app. I did not cancel her life. I just stopped funding it. By Saturday afternoon, the duplex looked like a model home that had never been lived in. The closets were half empty. The walls had pale squares where pictures used to hang. The robot vacuum sat quiet in its dock, like it did not know what to do without me. I wrote a note on plain paper and set it on the kitchen counter where the tablet sat. I did not decorate it. I did not explain everything. I wrote one sentence, and it was the only sentence that felt honest. "Hope they think this is funny too." Then I left my key on the note and walked out. I moved into a small sublet above a kayak repair shop in Kittery, Maine. The place smelled like resin and river water, and the floorboards creaked with every step. It was not fancy, but it was quiet. Quiet felt like medicine. That night, I got another message bubble on my phone because Delphine's number was still in my contacts and her name still lit up my screen. "Where are you?" she wrote. Then, "Did you seriously move out?" Then, "This is insane." I did not answer. I sat on my mattress and listened to the distant hum of the road. I kept thinking they wanted a punchline, but they were not ready for the ending. On Sunday, I received the location proof. It came from something we installed last year after a package got stolen. A smart lock on the back door, tied to an account Delphine and I both used. I logged in and opened the access history. I saw a code used Friday night at 9:14 p.m. It was not mine. It was labeled Sabine Guest. My mouth went dry. Sabine had access to our home while Delphine was out of state. I scrolled further and saw two other entries earlier in the week, both late at night. One was labeled Sabine Guest. One was Delphine, Maine. They had been meeting at our house without me while they joked about me like I was furniture. The next day, I went to the condo management office and asked if the camera footage in the shared hallway could be saved. I was still a tenant until the end of the month, and I had a right to request it for a dispute. The manager did not like drama, but he liked liability less. He said he could export one clip if I gave him the date and time. That clip became the killer receipt. It showed Sabine on our porch with a tote bag and a tripod case, grinning like she was heading to a party. It showed her using the guest code and stepping inside, then turning back to wave at someone off camera. It showed two other women following her in, carrying what looked like props. They were setting something up in my home. While Delphine drank cocktails on the beach and texted laughing emojis, her friends were inside my walls. I sat in my sublet and watched the video 3 times. Each time I felt less hurt and more clear. This was not one mean sentence. This was a plan with money, access, and a script. Delphine came home Monday night. I did not see it, but I heard about it through the voicemails she left. The first one was shock, her voice high and thin. "Where is everything? What did you do?" The second was anger, her breath loud. "You embarrassed me. My friends are here and this is humiliating." The third was quieter, like she finally understood the room was empty because I was empty of patience. I did not return to the duplex. I did not meet her in the driveway. I let the empty room speak for me because she had used my silence as a setup before. Now my silence was my boundary. 2 days later, an email came to Delphine from her hospital admin office. She forwarded it to me, maybe by mistake, maybe because she wanted me to panic. It said she was required to meet with compliance and HR about online conduct and workplace association. Sabine had a big mouth and a bigger fear of consequences. She ran her studio on reputation and contracts, and she could smell danger. When Delphine's job got involved, Sabine flipped fast. Sabine called me from a private number. I did not plan to answer, but I did. She said, "I did not mean for this to get real." Her voice shook for the first time I had ever heard. She admitted she had drafted a return home reveal script where Delphine would walk into the house and pretend I had left because I was too sensitive. They wanted to film her reading my note and laughing, then post it as proof that I was dramatic. Sabine said, "I already sent what I have to protect myself. They asked me to, and I complied." That was the betrayal, and it fit her. A person who lives by views will also live by blame. When the heat rises, they drop the closest thing to them. Delphine texted me that night, "We need to talk now." I replied with one line, "Only with a mediator." I did not want another hallway fight, another sharp smile turning into a knife. I wanted a room with rules. Gideon set up a mediation at a small office near downtown Portsmouth. The conference room smelled like stale coffee and printer paper. A wall clock ticked loud enough to be rude. Delphine walked in wearing a blazer like armor, and she looked at me like I had betrayed her. This was confrontation 3, and it happened only after proof. Delphine started with denial. "You are twisting it," she said. "There was no plan. You are paranoid." I slid one photo of the group chat onto the table, then another. Then I showed the bank transfer alert. Delphine's face tightened and she shifted into minimize. "It was jokes," she said. "It was content. It was not that deep." Gideon leaned back and said nothing because silence makes people fill space with truth. I played the security clip on my phone the moment Sabine used the guest code and stepped into my home. Delphine stared at it and her shoulders dropped a little. That was the partial admit. "Okay," she said. "They came over. It was going to be funny. I did not think you would take it like this." Her words landed flat because she still centered my reaction instead of her choice. Then came the emotional move, the last card. Delphine's eyes filled and she said, "I was under pressure. They have been there for me. I did not want to lose my friends, and I cannot lose you too." She reached toward me like tears were a bridge. I did not take her hand. I said, "You did not choose them once. You chose them over and over." My voice stayed quiet because I did not want to perform. "You called me a joke to my face and you paid for the punchline. Then you gave my home to people who laugh at me." Delphine whispered. I said I was sorry. Her tears fell on the table, and I felt something inside me stop shaking. It was not hate. It was relief. Gideon guided the rest in short steps. Delphine agreed to move her remaining things out by the end of the week. She agreed to reimburse me for the rent I had covered alone for months, since the shared account showed the pattern clearly. She agreed, in writing, to have her name removed from any shared utilities, because I did not want future ties. The hospital consequences hit 2 weeks later, and they were not my choice, but they were not a surprise either. Delphine's employer did not like public mess tied to their name. Her forwarded email became an official notice, and she was placed on unpaid leave pending review. Sabine kept her own studio safe by dumping Delphine publicly in a soft, smiling post. She wrote that she did not support mean-spirited content and that she was learning. It was the kind of apology that protects a brand more than a person. Delphine lost her friend group the same way she tried to use me, as a prop. The last time I went to the Duplex was to do a final walkthrough with the landlord. The air inside smelled like dust and lemon cleaner, but not like home. The pale squares on the wall looked like old scars. I realized I did not miss the space. I missed who I thought we were. 6 months after all that, my work got better, because my mind got quieter. I took a lead inspector role and trained new techs, showing them how to run a flow test and trust the numbers. I learned that a steady system does not beg to be respected. It simply works, and it refuses to leak for anyone. Delphine tried to reconnect once, in the safest way for her pride. She emailed me from a new personal address with the subject line, "Just one conversation." She wrote that she missed me, that she was in counseling, that she had changed. I did not reply. A year later, I moved north to Brunswick, Maine for a regional position that covered coastal sites and older mills. I rented a small house with a porch that faced pine trees instead of parking lots. The nights were quiet, and quiet felt earned. I kept my phone on the table without fear of it turning into a weapon. That is where I met Meyer Yalaski, who managed operations at a community ceramics studio. She was steady in a way that did not need loud proof. She asked questions and listened to answers like they mattered. When she laughed, it never cost someone else their dignity. One evening, we ate at a food truck courtyard by the river, standing under string lights while the air smelled like grilled corn and smoke. I watched families walk by, and I felt the strange peace of not being watched for a reaction. I thought about my old home, those empty rooms, that plain note. I realized my life had passed its own flow test, and this time, nothing cracked. Thank you so much for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe the channel.